All right, so today we're going to do Unit 2, Lesson 5, which is one-to-one functions. You can find this on page 17. So functions as rules can be divided into various categories based on shared characteristics. One characteristic is comprised of functions known as one-to-one. The following exercise will illustrate the difference between function that is one-to-one and one that is not. So exercise 1 says consider the two simple functions given by the equations f of x equals 2x and g of x equals x squared. Question A says map the domain of -2, 0, and 2 using each function. Fill in the range and show the mapping arrows. Okay, so this first one, I'm going to use the function f of x equals 2x. So if my domain of x, if you talks about the domain being x and our range being y, if I plug in -2 into this function, my output value that I get is going to be -4. So -2 times 2 gives me -4. If I plug in 0, that gives me 0. And if I plug in 2, that gives me +4. Great, now let's look at the other function. So what happens using g of x this time, and my domains are -2, 0, and 2 still. But if I plug in -2 for the g of x function, I get +4, so -2 times -2. And if I plug in 0 into this function, I get out 0. And if I plug in 2 for this function, again, I get +4. It's no need to repeat the number 4. It's just going to map to that exact same number. All right, so part B says, what is fundamentally different between these two functions in terms of how the elements of this domain get mapped to the elements of the range? Well, if I look at this, my f of x function here, this f of x function, every single input or x value gets mapped to exactly one y value. So I'm going to mention that. So each element, I'll say each domain element for that f of x function gets mapped to one range function. Just one range. It's very similar. There's no outputs that repeat. That's very important. No outputs or ranges repeat themselves. Very, very important that we notice that none of them repeat. Which brings us to what we're studying today, one-to-one functions. Very important that we recognize one-to-one functions. A function f of x is called one-to-one if x1 does not equal x2, implies that the f of x1 does not equal f of x2. So what this really means, guys, it's not super hard, just maybe the notation. It's just saying that every x has to be different. So you have different x's. And that means, therefore, if you have different x's, this refers to that you're going to have different y's. So whatever you put as your x's, those different x's should always have a different y. So different inputs give different outputs. That's really what this sums up to be. Different inputs give different outputs. I would make sure I highlight that. So let's go ahead and look through some things that deal with one-to-one functions. Exercise number 2 says, of the 4 tables below, one represents a relationship where y is a one-to-one function of x. Determine which is and explain why the others are not. So remember, a one-to-one function means that you have different x's and then you also have different y's. So when I look at number 1, I'm also looking for these one-to-one functions. Are they actually functions as well? Well, if you remember functions, we talked about traveling. 4 can travel to 2, but 4 can also not travel to -2. And therefore 9 can't travel to 3, and 9 can't travel to -3. So no, this is not one-to-one, but it's also not a function. Number 2, let's kind of look at this one. Remember, one-to-one means you have different x's and different y's. So when I look at this, I notice here that my -2 goes to 1 and 0 also goes to 1. So no, that's not going to work either because my y's repeat themselves. That also makes it not one-to-one. Well, then I look at 3. Well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it goes to 2, 4, 8, and 16. Perfect. They're all different x's and different y's. When I look at number 4, I noticed here that I have -2. It goes to some value, and so does -2 down here, which means I can't go from one. X can't repeat itself just to be a function. But then I also noticed that my x maps to the exact same y. So no, that's also not going to work because it's not a function. So remember, one-to-one just simply means you have different x's and they also have to map to different y's. All right, so exercise 3 says, consider the following 4 graphs which show a relationship between the variables y and x. Question A says, circle the 2 graphs above that are functions. Explain how you know they are functions. Well, we remember doing this thing way back in, let's say, Unit 2, Lesson 2 or 3. We talked about that vertical line test. And we know that it's not a function if we draw a vertical line multiple times down our graph and it hits more than one point. So as I look at this one here, I pass through it. It seems to only hit one point at a time for each line. So I'm going to say number 1 is a function. I look at the second one. Oh no, it hits multiple spots when I draw vertical lines. So nope, this is not a function. So yes and no. And I look at 3, draw a vertical line down it. Nope, it hits more than one spot. So it's not a function. And number 4, if I draw vertical lines, they only hit one spot, which is perfect. So yes, 1 and 4 are classified as functions because they pass the vertical line test. Part B says, of the 2 graphs you circled, which is one-to-one? Explain how you can tell from its graph. Well, I'm going to go ahead and erase what's going on in in graph 1 and graph 4 because those are the graphs I'm really trying to see if they're one-to-one. So remember, one-to-one functions, I have to have exactly one x value and it maps to one y value. They can't repeat themselves. So when I look at this graph, I see here, if I kind of just look at this, as I look at this, I do this method that I draw horizontal lines across the graph. And if I draw horizontal lines across the graph and notice that they cross more than one time, then that means it is not one-to-one. So I look at this and the question says, which one is one-to-one? Well, it can't be 1 because it maps, and I circled 2 spots when I drew a horizontal line. Therefore, only graph number 4 is a one-to-one function. Which leads us into the horizontal line test. If any given horizontal line passes through the graph of a function at most one time, then that function is 1-to-1. This test works because horizontal lines represent constant y values. Hence, if a horizontal line intercepts a graph more than once, an output has been repeated. So it's key here that you know the horizontal line test. So exercise 4 says, which of the following represents the graph of 1-to-1 functions? So before we answer exercise number 4, I'm going to kind of scroll down here and give us some different things and some different information. So we know functions, or to identify a function, it has to be the vertical line test, and then if we're looking something that's 1-to-1, it not only has to pass the vertical line test, but it also has to pass the horizontal line test. But for 1-to-1, we only use the horizontal. So function, identify if it's a function, we use the vertical line test. If it's a 1-to-1, we use the horizontal line test plus the vertical line test. So you might want to write that down somewhere on your notes. So exercise 4 says, which of the following represents the graph of a 1-to-1 function? So remember, 1-to-1 functions have to pass the horizontal line test and the vertical line test. So I'm going to go ahead and look at this. Let's see. So first I'll do the vertical line test to see, kind of narrow things down. We'll have this one didn't work out. But however, if I do the horizontal line test in green, it does pass the horizontal line test. But because it doesn't pass both tests, it's a no-go. Can't use that one. Let's look at the next one. I'll do the vertical line test. Yes, it does pass the vertical line test. Let's see if it passes the horizontal line test. Nope, it doesn't pass the vertical line test. It passes the vertical line test, but not the horizontal line test. So that's a no as well. Let's look at number 3. Let's do the vertical line test. Yes, it passes the vertical line test. And let's see if it passes the horizontal line test. Yes, it does. So that makes it a function that is 1-to-1. Now let's look at the last one to see if that one checks out. We'll do a vertical line test. Yes, it passes the vertical line test. And let's check and see if it passes the horizontal. Nope, it doesn't pass the the horizontal line test. So no, it's not 1-to-1. So therefore, our answer of which of the following represents the graph of a 1-to-1 function is number 3. All right, so make sure you star anything or highlight anything that you would like to ask questions tomorrow in class. See you guys later.